Welcome to another episode of the Back in Time podcast with Kyle and JD, where every week we jump into our DeLorean, cruise to 88 miles per hour, and travel back in time to review our favorite films. This week, in episode 8, we travel back to June 30th of 1995 to review the action film Judge Dredd, starring Sylvester Stallone, Diane Lane, and Rob Schneider. First off, I want to thank you for clicking the download button on the podcast. I want to remind you to find us on Apple Podcast and the podcast app on your phone or device, and subscribe to our page. It's super easy, and every time we post a new episode, it will automatically download to your device. Also, leave us a 5-star review while you're there. That helps us grow the podcast and eventually pick up sponsors to help keep this podcast going. You can find us on social media at Back in Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All episodes are also up on YouTube. You can also find us online at backintimepod.wordpress.com. Now, on to the show. I knew I'd say that.
Holy crud. He's a sitting duck out there.
He knows what he's doing.
The law. Drop your weapon. These bloods are under arrest. This is your final order. It's just Dredd. Hey! You want to be afraid of somebody? Be afraid of me.
All right, welcome back to the Back in Time podcast. We are in week number 8 for our episode. This week is going to be Judge Dredd. But let's jump back. Or I guess first off, welcome to the show, Justin, my co-host as always. How's it going, man?
Doing pretty well. I'm definitely excited about this week's show. I know that it was me that was definitely forcing the issue to do Judge Dredd. So I definitely thank you for jumping onto into the DeLorean with me and heading to 1995 to discuss this movie.
Absolutely. So, did we get any feedback last week on our last episode, which was Jumanji?
Yeah. So our number one fan, Jesse, he definitely called me up and was a little upset about the way we portrayed him about being afraid of the drums. So
okay.
I guess we can offer an official apology, Jesse. Perhaps next week we can have you call in and, rebuttal us a little bit with how we portrayed Jumanji for the youth class.
Well, since you tortured him, I offered no apology. But as his brother, you can offer that one up. But I think overall we've got some pretty positive reviews, and we're growing by the episode, which is exciting. So to all the new listeners tuning in today for the first time, welcome aboard. And we're excited to jump into the DeLorean and cruise back to 1995 one last time here in the month of September. So, Justin, why don't you, for somebody that's, never listened to the podcast before, give a brief rundown of what exactly we cover on this show.
So basically what we try to do in the Back in Time podcast is we'll literally jump into the DeLorean. Like we're not joking around. We're actually in 1995 right now. And we take a look at the movie and we sort of compare it to what our initial thoughts were as 10-year-old children when Judge Dredd was the coolest thing ever, personally. And to, analyze it now as adults to see, compare it against how it did in the box office, compare it against other movies at the time, discuss a little bit about the actors. This would probably be our biggest starred movie, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so, talk about the actors, talk about where they've gone and what they've done, and, do a little bit of analysis about, what the filmmaker was trying to go for, what the writing team was hoping to accomplish, and, what the actors were definitely hoping to not get made fun of for.
Yeah. And, I that's a very good description. And real quick, so if you are new to the podcast, the show drops every single Friday morning. So it will download directly to your device. All you have to do is go to iTunes, subscribe to the channel. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it does help us grow the podcast. You can also find us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Back in Time Pod. And we are online at backintimepod.wordpress.com. And you can find all of our blogs, our episodes. We have an Amazon store on there with DVDs, Blu-rays of all the movies we cover. I also put in different t-shirts. So if you want to support the show, head on over to the website, check out those items. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does give us a little kickback on the back end for putting some of the items up there. And it's always cool stuff. I don't put anything bad up there. So you'll like it. Take a look at it. Now, generally, this is about the time when we jump in the box office. However, there's not a lot going on box office-wise other than it continues to just plow through the box office in September here and just continues to rack in money. I would say the one surprise of the weekend was The Kingsman, The Golden Circle. Did you see how well that movie did first weekend?
How well it did?
Yeah.
No, I thought it came out next weekend.
Nope, came out last Friday or Thursday night, and it actually was number one movie at the box office. Finally dethroned it. It did $39 million first couple days.
Good for them.
Which is I never watched the original, so maybe that's why I wasn't too stoked about it. But I was surprised the Lego movie didn't do better than it did. That only brought in about 20-something million, and from my memory, all the Lego movies prior have just been massive success. So I don't know. So if you're interested in seeing any of those movies, we don't really have much feedback other than we both saw it. We both enjoyed it. Justin didn't love it. I loved it. So that's a movie to definitely check out and take a look into. So any other thoughts on anything before we jump into some Judge Dredd here?
I knew you'd ask that. We could superimpose the Judge Dredd saying that if you want.
Consider it done.
I knew you'd say that.
No, I like again. So I kind of want to jump into Dredd. I'm sorry, Judge Dredd, not to be confused with the recent Dredd movie, which I thought was also spectacular.
I thought it was dreadful.
Oh,
Heyo! You knew I'd say that, though.
Well, that was nice wordplay. You seriously didn't like the new Dredd?
Never saw it.
Oh, ouch! And I thought we were friends.
Well, you thought wrong, bud.
Ouch. So I want to preface this talking about Dredd. If you're good to jump into the movie, I've got a really funny Judge Dredd story.
Yeah. So is this like first memory, or what do you got?
No, this is go back in time to probably the years 2000.
Okay.
Christmas 2000, a high school age JD puts in his Christmas list and requests Judge Dredd on DVD for Christmas.
Wow.
I was so stoked. Maybe it's 2001, whatever. But I was so excited, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get Judge Dredd. It's going to be great. I'm going to watch it nonstop. This is how much I love the movie.
Yeah.
I had printed out, back in 95, I had printed out pictures from AOL and taped it to my locker.
That's
serious.
Awesome.
I think I still have the pictures, too.
I remember doing stuff like that, too. That's a good story, though. Continue.
Yeah, we're not done yet. So come Christmas morning, 2000, maybe 2001, I sit down and I get my Christmas presents, and I notice one is very certainly going to be a DVD.
Yes.
So excited because I only asked for one movie. There was only one I asked for. It was Judge Dredd.
Okay.
I opened it up. Can you guess what was in that package?
So 2000. Fast and Furious Part 1?
No, even better / worse. Joe's Apartment.
Oh my gosh.
And, at this point, I'm a teenager. I know Santa Claus isn't real. It's been a couple of years for me.
Yeah.
I say, Mom, are you kidding me? How did you go from Judge Dredd to Joe's apartment? And she goes, they both started with J. That was her justification for buying me Joe's apartment. And I still have it on DVD. I watch it from time to time.
Well, we're going to have to do an episode of Joe's apartment just because of that story.
Yes.
We might as well. I mean, you've got the DVD. You don't have Judge Dredd, though. Do you have to watch it on Netflix?
I did catch it on Netflix. I do own it on DVD. Years later, I was able to obtain it through non-Santa Claus means.
Yeah. So if you don't have Netflix, do you know where else you can get Judge Dredd?
Probably for a penny at any video store.
Or on our Amazon store. Hey-o, shameless plug. Now, I do not have a great memory of Judge Dredd or a cool story to go along with that. But that was a pretty awesome story. But you never got Judge Dredd, though, so here I am with probably a brand new pair of Jordans, and you're sitting there with Joe's apartment.
Yeah, again, cultural differences, man.
Awesome. So why don't we jump into some intro to Judge Dredd here?
Let's do it.
Good. So Judge Dredd is a 1995 American superhero film based on a comic book character of the same name. It's directed by Danny Cannon, produced by Edward Pressman, Charles Lippincott, and Bo Marks. It's written by William Wisher and Stephen D'Souza. The film stars Sylvester Stallone, Diane Lane, Rob Schneider, and a cast of others. The film takes place in 2080 and depicts a world in the crime-ridden metropolis Megacity 1, following an unspecified disaster that turned the world into a cursed wasteland. The survivors established a corps of judges whose role combines that of police, judge, jury, and executioner. The film follows Judge Joseph Dredd, one of the most dedicated street judges, who has been framed for the murder of his own half-brother, the psychotic Rico.
Psychotic's going a little bit far. Come on, let's be polite to Rico.
And so, I know you shared your story, but what are your first memories of Judge Dredd?
So my first memories of Judge Dredd, I remember getting it from the video store.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it in theaters.
Yep, not many did.
Be polite, come on. Rented it from the video store, fell in love with it, returned it to Blockbuster, ran right next door to Toys R Us, picked up the action figures.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, I still really, really, really would like to have a lawgiver. Whether it be an actual operating one or, one of those ones that those resin ones that you can get from Comic-Con.
Right.
I always want to get one, but I haven't. And then beyond that, I mean, one of my favorite Sega Genesis games is by far Judge Dredd.
Okay.
What's little known fact, Blockbuster used to hold video game tournaments. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
So in 1995, the video games in the Blockbuster tournament were NBA Jam and Judge Dredd.
Yeah, I know for
tournament?
sure I played in the NBA Jam one.
Needless to say, I won the tournament.
Awesome.
So I've got this very fond memory of kicking everyone's ass in NBA Jam.
Yeah.
And then destroying Judge Dredd on Sega Genesis. And I won a year's free video game rentals from Blockbuster. All thanks to Judge Dredd.
That's an awesome story. And for sure, we're going to have to do a back in time episode with video games, and we're going to have to get together and play some Sega.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Judge Dredd game is really difficult. And as we get into breaking down the movie, I can include parts from the video game that are super duper hard because I'm still pissed at some of them, especially when you're talking about fighting the robots and all you have left is your pea shooter.
So I guess my first memory too would definitely be Blockbuster. This is not a movie that I saw in theaters. As I drug my feet on this for 4 weeks on wanting to review this movie, I'm not a giant fan of the movie, but watching it back, and we'll get into this in the review, I did like some parts of it.
Oh, that is good to hear.
Specifically, the star of the film, Rob Schneider.
Rob Schneider is so fantastic in this movie. Talking about casting a little bit, if I'm jumping the gun.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's so many similarities in this movie, and the relationship between Sylvester Stallone and Rob Schneider in Demolition Man.
Mm-hmm.
Some scenes to me even bleed together.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a couple of things, just some stuff that I found. I did listen to an interview, and also there's about a 22-minute making of the movie on YouTube. I probably should have told you about that beforehand, huh? But Stallone said that making Dredd, it was a process. So to build the set, which you can say whatever you want about the movie, the set piece is phenomenal, and that took an entire year to build. So they were in pre-production for a long time, which is why the budget is what it is. Now, according to an interview with one of the writers, Stephen De Souza, and this is back in 2013, the original cut of Judge Dredd was NC-17, and it had to be recut and submitted 5 times to MPAA in order just to get it down to an R rating. And then Stallone in the studio recut the film again and knocked it down to PG-13. What are your thoughts on that, and how much do you want to see that original cut?
Oh my goodness. Like, I didn't realize that, but the movie, for being 1995, and again, what, we were 10 years old when we probably saw it.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it is a kid's movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it is brutal. When dude gets his arms ripped off.
Yeah.
Like, that is horrible. And Rob Schneider, he's swearing like a Schneider. And, like, yeah, this was definitely if this version of the movie came out now, it would be hard pressed to not be R with what they included.
Right. Yeah, I just feel like it would have been a better movie if they would have let the director do what he was supposed to do.
Well, but that's why the new Dredd version is such a good movie, because it is really superly brutal.
Good. That makes me want to watch it more.
Good. And I think it's still on Netflix.
One of the things that the director, Cannon, said is he was so disheartened over the constant creative disputes with Stallone that he swore he would never work with another big-name actor. And if you look at his resume, he doesn't. After that, he did... the biggest movie he did, actually, like, movie, not TV show, was I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which, I mean, there's a couple big actors in there, but not like to Stallone's extent. And everything he's done after that is like TV. So I just think it's, Stallone maybe should have kept his foot out of his mouth a little bit and let somebody do their job and not step on their toes.
I knew you'd say that.
Now, let's talk about casting a little bit, just real quick. There's a couple characters to get into. So let's touch on Judge Dredd, which is played by Sylvester Stallone, Sly. What are your thoughts on him in this role?
As a kid, I thought he was so perfect.
Yeah.
I was just like, why wouldn't it be him? I was vaguely familiar with the comic. And so as a child, I was definitely excited to see him. He was a big name. Obviously, we all knew him from Cobra.
Right.
But as an adult, like he looks the part. I can't help but compare it to the new Dredd movie, and can't help but think Karl Urban was a superior Judge Dredd.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have much of a thought on that just because I haven't seen it, but yeah, that'll be interesting when I do watch it to compare the two.
The big thing about it is Judge Dredd keeps his helmet on.
Yeah.
Versus Sylvester Stallone being a face actor, so he has to walk around, Mr. I am law, with his helmet off.
So one thing, just looking into the movie a little bit that I found interesting, this kind of starts a period in his career where he started to go a little downhill, dare I say, for about, I'd say, a good 8 years. So, Judge Dredd is followed up by a movie called Daylight, which wasn't a massive hit. Copland's pretty solid. Do you like Copland?
I saw Copland in theaters, and
Yeah.
I don't remember much of it other than I saw it in theaters.
I know that movie's regarded pretty well, but after that he did The Good Life, and then he did Voice for Ants, and then Get Carter, and then Driven, which was a flop. I See You, which was a bit of a flop. Avenging Angelo, which I've never seen. A movie called Shade. And it wasn't really until he kind of reinvented the Rocky franchise in '06 that he got back on his feet. So this is kind of like a little bit of a downhill slope for him.
That's a really good statistical analysis of his career from the mid '90s to the early to mid zeros.
Mm-hmm. We also have Rob Schneider playing Fergie. What's your favorite Rob Schneider movie, and why is it Surf Ninjas?
Well, I would typically say I love when Rob Schneider's a stapler. But in Surf Ninjas, and I can't wait till we moto surf till we do Surf Ninjas.
That's such a good one.
If only to compare moto surfing to the car surfing scenes in Teen Wolf.
Yeah.
Who stole from who?
I mean, his career really took off after this, I feel like. And he's always played like that sidekick, like you said, stapler. So, I mean, it basically goes Home Alone 2. He's the Don't Count Your Cash in Public, Cedric. Surf Ninjas, Demolition Man, Beverly Hillbillies, Judge Dredd, Down Periscope, where he's like the hilarious co-captain of the boat. I don't know when was the last time you saw that. That's a good movie. The Water Boy, he's the townie. You can do it! And then it goes into his bigger roles with Big Daddy, Deuce Bigalow, Little Nicky, The Animal, and the Hot Chick, and his career just takes off.
Yeah, and where is he now?
He's on that downhill slide like Sly. I think maybe it's that age group when you hit like the mid-40s and people are just like, what do we put you in?
Yeah.
We can't keep playing you as the fumbling, bumbling idiot.
Although he was pretty good in The Animal.
Yeah. Rico, I'm not real familiar with this actor. His name is Armand Asante. He's done a couple things. He played Gotti, or he played John Gotti in the movie Gotti. He's also an American gangster with Denzel Washington. But what did you think of Rico, though, overall, as kind of the villain of the movie here?
I think he was, the way that they used him was a little confusing.
Yeah.
Because you don't know much about him, but you know he's the bad guy, so he does bad things.
Right.
And he also smokes a cigar, so you know he's not Arnold, so that means he's a bad guy. And outside of that, I mean, I think that, he kills hundreds of judges in 48 hours, but maybe in the NC-17 version, we get to see all of those judges brutally murdered by his hand. Because I think for the way that they portray him, for how vicious he's supposed to be, I don't think the payoff is necessarily there. He's not as scary as he could be.
Right. Yep. No, I agree. And then last bit of casting, we'll go with Hershey, which is played by the great Diane Lane, who's been nominated for so many awards in her career. But let's talk a little Hershey.
As a kid, I gotta say, before I hit puberty, she didn't do anything for me.
Oh, really? I thought she was hot. But
hey, you had Jordan's, I had Joe's apartment. I don't deny the fact that you were, more of a man at 10 years old than I was. But she's a good character in this film because she's sort of that foil to what Dredd is. Where Judge Dredd is the knock 'em dead, no questions asked. Like, I knew you'd say that.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know you're going to say that. She's going to ask the questions, and she's going to be that intellectual judge that really does foil Judge Dredd's punch you in the mouth.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. And then just, real quick, just to get some feedback from you on a writing standpoint, what did you think of the actual story? And The story is by John Wagner, and again, D'Souza. What did you think of the actual script? And I'm sure there was a lot of changes in production from the sound of it with Stallone, but
it's a pretty formulaic 90s movie.
Yeah.
It relies on big set pieces, like you were saying.
Yes.
The story, I think it's very paper thin. Like, we don't fully understand the Lazarus Project. We don't fully, like, why is he doing it? Like, I think you need, like, a more cemented background in the comic book, because they talk about, the robot wars, the block wars. They talk about all of these things that are very prevalent in the comic book, that if you don't know about the ABC robots, if you don't know about the cloning of the judges, if you don't know a lot of this backstory, it just seems very convoluted.
Right.
But with that said, I mean, it is a pretty good, straightforward action movie. We get right into the action. It's got the 90s comedy, that they keep that heart that's very important in 90s movies, which Rob Schneider, as you mentioned earlier, applies to so many good films.
Yep.
How he's never won Best Actor, I don't know.
So just to clarify real quick too. So Steven D'Souza is the screenplay. Michael DeLuca is the story. The characters are John Wagner. So he's actually the creator of the comic book character. And he said in 2012 in an interview with Empire Magazine, the story had nothing to do with Judge Dredd, and Judge Dredd wasn't really Judge Dredd, even though Stallone was perfect for the part. He did praise the production value in the budget of the film, but ultimately he thought they just tried to do too much and told the wrong story. So,
yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. You can't argue that in my opinion, but let's take a quick 2-minute break here to talk about our website and a few other things here.
What are you doing, Doc? I need fuel.
So, Justin, I feel really bad that your mom never got you the Judge Dredd DVD or Blu-ray that you wanted, but I wanted to let our listeners know that that doesn't have to happen to you. You don't have to wait to be disappointed on Christmas Day with Joe's apartment to get a copy for your own home to watch and see over and over again. All you have to do is go to backintimepod.wordpress.com, click on our Amazon store page at the top, and you will find links directly to the Blu-ray and DVD for Judge Dredd. And it doesn't cost you anything extra. This is a way to help support the podcast. You just click right on the link. It takes you right into the Amazon page. You can pick a new copy, used copy. They're very cheap on there too for Judge Dredd, and have it shipped directly to your home. And that will go a long way, again, in supporting the podcast and helping us grow. And we'll get back to the review in a second. Last piece of business, the full review next week will again come out on Friday. It's every week in the morning. You should get that. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on your Apple podcast device or the podcast app on your phone or device, and that'll automatically download to the device that you're using. You can also write to us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Let us know what you want us to review in October. So since it's Halloween, we're going to go with a more horror theme or Halloween theme, thinking possibly some Addams Family or Pumpkinhead or Halloween or some of those classic movies. So send us a message. Tell us what you want us to review, and we will take that into consideration as we make the list of our next 4 or 5 episodes for next month. All right, back to the podcast. Now let's talk some film reception and box office numbers, and then we'll jump into the actual review here. So as always, let's try and guess the reception of the film here. So let's go with critics first. What do you think the score was on Rotten Tomatoes?
27.
Okay, great. And let's go with response from the fans. What's their rating?
Drum roll. 19.
19, okay. So you're going critics higher, fans lower. Okay.
Yeah, I realized as soon as that came out of my mouth that that's probably going to be horribly inaccurate. But
you're horribly close to being almost correct, except flipping it around. So the critic score is an 18 from critics, and the fan score was 30. So I was going to ask, do these numbers surprise you? But judging by your guess, you're only off by 4%. So I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't. I understand what the movie is and what it represents,
Yes.
and I could understand. I would have thought that the critics would have responded a little bit more than the fans, in that I would think that the fans would have been harsher because it was a comic book movie.
Right.
Whereas the critics would have judged it more for its merits as a big set-piece action film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've got a couple reviews. So we've got our old buddy Roger Ebert again. He had this to say about the movie: Stallone survives it, but his supporting cast, also including an uninvolved Joanne Chen and a tremendously intense Jurgen Prochnov, isn't well used. So he's not happy with the supporting cast of the movie. Rita Kempley from the Washington Post said, aside from the affable Schneider and the able Lane, the cast seems to be in deep shock. Make that Dreadlock.
Heyo.
I did find one good review, and this is years later, but it's from a critic named Brian McKay. He's from efilmscritic.com. He said, Dredd is the kind of film that defines guilty pleasure. Stallone and Schneider are miscast, but the mindless sci-fi action is fun. Which I would say, I mean, that's probably what you love about the movie, though, right? Is the combo between Stallone and Schneider.
Yeah, to me, it's a 90s kid's dream.
Now, one thing to add in here, though, although it's got terrible reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, out of almost 100,000 votes on IMDb, it carries a 5.5 out of 10. So
That's better than Pizza Parlor Massacre.
Much better. And we've got to get that up on our Amazon store. Might as well make a few bucks out of it, right?
A few, yeah.
So what is it about Judge Dredd that you think makes this movie, so poorly reviewed in your eyes?
It comes down to the amount of movies similar to it that came out in that time. Those action comedies, from Surf Ninjas to even Demolition Man was pretty comedic.
Yeah.
And Stallone goes from being a hard-nosed 80s action star to being in these buddy films.
Mm-hmm.
And the market was just so saturated with them. I mean, it's like, comic book movies now, they're not getting the ratings that they were, 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it was definitely this oversaturation, and the story is, as we've discussed, is kind of paper thin. Stallone, I think he's got more Razzies than regular nominations.
Yes, that's a shame.
But I think it's a confused movie that probably was mismarketed, and
Yes.
if you're not looking for just a mindless sci-fi jaunt, then you're gonna hate it.
So that's a good transition. So I do have a quote from Sylvester Stallone here on the movie, and this is years later, so this is in the 2010s. And he said, I loved the property when I read it, because it took a genre that I love, which you could term the action morality film, and made it a bit more sophisticated. It had political overtones. It showed how if we don't curb the way we run our judicial system, the police may end up running our lives. It dealt with archaic governments. It dealt with cloning and all kinds of things that could happen in the future. And it was also bigger than any film I've done in physical stature and the way that it was designed. All the people were dwarfed by the system and the architecture. It shows how insignificant human beings could be in the future. There's a lot of action in the movie and some great acting too. It just wasn't balls to the wall. But I do look back on Judge Dredd as a real missed opportunity. It seemed that lots of fans had a problem with Dredd removing his helmet because he never does it in the comic books. But for me, it is more about wasting such great potential. There was an idea. Just think of all the opportunities that were there to do interesting stuff with the cursed Earth scenes. It didn't live up to what it could have been. It probably could have been much more comic, really humorous and fun. What I learned out of the experience was that we shouldn't have tried to make it Hamlet. It was more Hamlet and eggs. So if you listen to him talk, he's a brilliant guy. He's not a meathead by any means. So if you're like a big fan of like the Rocky movies, like he's not a big dum-dum. Like he knows what he's doing. So I got to make up for crapping on him a little bit from earlier. Let's talk some box office numbers. So this was released June 30th, 1995. The production budget for the film was $90 million. Opening weekend, Judge Dredd grossed $12.2 million, ranking only number 5 at the box office. I would say that certainly surprises me that it's only 5. Week 2, they pulled in another $12.1 million, so it held pretty steady, but it fell to number 7 at the box office. Okay. And that brought the 10-day total to 24.3, which would be respectable for most films, but definitely not with a budget of $90 million. Dredd would only spend 4 weeks in the box office total before dropping down to just a few hundred screens for several weeks after that. Total domestic gross $34.6 million. Internationally, it did very well. It brought in an extra $78.8 million, which brought the worldwide gross to $113,493,481.
It must have been big in India.
It had to be. So it does recoup the budget for the picture, but ultimately, I'm sure with marketing and all that, they took a loss on this. Mm-hmm. I mean, from your memory, is this the first miss for Sylvester Stallone in a movie?
Oh, no. I mean, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Okay, so you think that was a big failure on the box office?
Or are you challenging me to get a direct one for his first actual failure? Because I don't think Cobra did very well in the box office.
It probably didn't. I think this might have been the first time that it really lost a lot of money, though. That would be my guess, but we can figure that out later. So what else was in theaters on June 30th, 1995? The number 1 movie at the box office, which was also debuting the exact same day as Judge Dredd, was Apollo 13.
Oh, boy.
Starring Tom Hanks. That opened $46 million opening weekend. Number 2 was Pocahontas, Disney movie, $28 million. Number 3 is the reboot to the Batman franchise with Batman Forever, $25.5 million. And then also opening that same weekend was the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger movie that made $19 million. And then you have Judge Dredd at 5, Congo at 6, number 7, The Bridges of Madison County, number 8, Casper, number 9, Braveheart, and number 10, Die Hard with a Vengeance. So talk about a who's who of cinema. That's a pretty good lineup.
It is a good lineup, and there's very familiar movies. You said it was Batman Forever that came out?
Yeah.
Which one? That was Jim Carrey and
Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones. Yep.
Jeez.
And then, interesting note, I just out of curiosity, I just looked at the total gross for those top 3 movies because I know they all did very well. So Apollo 13 did $355 million worldwide. Pocahontas did $346 million worldwide, and Batman Forever did $336 million. So that's over $1 billion collectively just from the top 3 movies.
Yeah, so I mean, Judge Dredd was in great company for when it came out, and it would be hard pressed to beat any of those movies. Yep,
absolutely. Let's jump into the review. So we got interesting facts and box office out of the way here. So the movie's going to begin with a credit scene. It shows all the Dredd comic books, and then you have a rolling Star Wars-esque title, which is actually voiced by James Earl Jones, and it said yeah. So I did catch that. Now it says in the 3rd millennium, the world changed, climate, nations, all were in upheaval. The earth transformed into a poisonous, scorched desert known as the Cursed Earth. Millions of people crowded into a few mega cities where roving bands of street savages created violence the justice system could not control. Law as we know it collapsed. From the decay rose a new order, a society ruled by a new elite force, a force with the power to dispense both justice and punishment. They were the police, jury, and executioner all in one. They were the judges. So what do you think of the opening credits here? I thought that was pretty cool. And obviously James Earl Jones is a perfect touch to it.
I think it sets the tone really well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think it's rewatching it now in the year 2017, seeing all of the, political turmoil and all of the, whether you say it's an upcoming war or however you look at it, it definitely mirrors the way that society sort of is now, more so than 95, potentially.
Yeah.
So it's like it hits home. You're just like, oh my gosh, this could really happen.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was really excited about that opening scene. And I hate to do this, but it's not the cursed earth. It's the cursed earth.
Cursed earth. Yeah, okay. My fault. I stand corrected. Now, the movie begins. We get our first shot of Rob Schneider here. His character name is Fergie. Clearly, he's to me, one of the standouts of the movie. I think he's hilarious in this. We have our first look at this new universe. There's flying cars. I thought the actual look of the city was really cool. They do pass over the top of the Statue of Liberty. So, I mean, is it safe to assume this is New York, or is this just some other planet of just stuff they've all, like a hodgepodge of everything?
I mean, I think it's safe to say that it's New York, but the way that it's a hodgepodge of everything, that it's probably not New York.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, they've kind of taken stuff and moved it where they wanted to. That's definitely possible. He's been assigned, so Fergie has been assigned to Sector 12, which he calls Heavenly Heaven. Where they land, though, is not very heavenly, so there's actually a riot in progress. The flying ship sets down and says, "Have a good day." He gets out, and there's just fires and guns and all that stuff going off, so he kind of gets dropped into a bad place. And one of the things he says when he gets out is, "Well, it's better than prison." We have our first, funny Rob Schneider line. He enters into what I assume is going to be his new home. He's met by a group of vagrants, and they pull a gun on him. Back in the city, you have two judges pull up in these futuristic-looking like motorbikes, which is called motorcycles. The two judges request backup, and we get our first glimpse of Judge Dredd. He says, "I am the law. Drop your weapons. This is your final warning." And back in Fergie's apartment, he says, "Hey guys, how about I go down there and just surrender? It'll throw them all off." So what did you think of your first glimpse of Stallone here as Judge Dredd?
Stallone, I'm eating a cracker. Oh, so I think that Judge Dredd, the first time they show him, he's on the motorbike. He is badass as all hell.
Yeah.
He walks into the middle between the two, which I don't fully understand what's going on with this block war. We got Dexter's dad, James Remar. They're just shooting out the window, like needlessly at the other side and then down at the ground. And Judge Dredd says, "Well, their bullets can't hit me."
Yeah.
And we get that, and the first, "I am the law." Just lays it down for the first of many times.
I knew you'd say that.
Hello. So yeah, it's the perfect introduction, and to keep comic book fans at peace, he keeps his helmet on, and it takes a while before he does fully pull it off.
Yeah, a little while.
I think he's pretty badass in this scene.
Yeah. So one thing he does do in the next part, he fires a grenade into the building and busts down the wall. And then, above one of the rooms, he actually shoots out some of the floor and he drops down from the ceiling, which is a really cool scene, and shoots one of the guys. And then he looks at Hershey and Rookie and says, "This room has been pacified." His voice just cracks me up. The Rookie gets a little overzealous, though, and he runs into the next room. Dredd tells him to stop, but he doesn't listen. He kicks open the door and gets shot right in the chest. Dredd yells, "You're under arrest. Throw down your weapons and be prepared to be judged." So once the gun is... So first off, his gun is voice activated, which I know you talked about this, and that's one of the things you want to get at some point. What's the name of it again? I know I've got it written down, but just so I don't keep calling it gun. A lawgiver, right. And then he one of the things that he requests from his lawgiver is called a double whammy.
Yeah, it's one of the best It's one of the best ammunitions in the video game, the double whammy. So don't laugh.
Yeah, I'll try not to laugh. So he gives out a sentence to the bad guy, the one that had pulled the gun on Rob Schneider originally. He gives him 20 years for something, and then the last one is a murder of a street judge. And the guy says, "Let me guess, life." And then he pulls out his lawgiver and shoots him in the head and says, "Death. Court's adjourned."
One-liners.
So many one-liners. Judge Dredd tells Hershey to not blame herself for the rookie dying. She says, "Wouldn't it be nice just once for you to have some emotion?" Which he replies with, "Emotion?" So next in the hallway, we have this like servo-droid that's going by, and Judge Dredd senses something's up. He stops it, tells it to surrender, opens up the front, and good old Fergie's in there again. He pulls his citizen card and realizes he hasn't even been out for 24 hours. So he sentences him to another 5 years. Fergie tries to protest, says he's being misjudged, but he's taken away. Hershey says he might be telling the truth. So
You say that.
Next, the panel of council members talk about the city. They argue over what the next steps will be. They have 65 million people living in a space designed for 20 million. Boy, if that doesn't sound like New York, I don't know what does.
It's applicable to today.
Yeah, absolutely. Judge Dredd is called in to meet with the main council member. He pulls off his helmet. This is one of the issues with the movie in a lot of fans' eyes. So Dredd is not supposed to remove his helmet, but 16 minutes into the film, he's already taken it off. What are your thoughts? Excuse me. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, again, I'm going to go from childhood where I was like, you know, there it is. What took him so long? Like, why did he have his helmet on?
Right.
To as an adult, being a complete comic book nerd and being like, you son of a bitch, you leave that helmet on.
Yeah. I mean, do you think this movie would work better had he kept it on the whole time?
Yes, the example is Dredd.
Okay. Yeah, again, you would know better than I on that one. But I mean, I gotta imagine this is the studio saying, hey, we have Sylvester Stallone as the lead character. He's very recognizable. We can't hide his face for 90 minutes.
Oh, you're absolutely right. From a studio's point of view, there's no way they could have done it. I mean, the Marvel movies don't do that. I mean, you know, Iron Man spends 95% of the movie as Tony Stark. He's never in his costume.
Yep.
And you have to think that, you know, doing so, especially in the international market, like you have to have that face recognition where, you know, when you're looking at the American market, we didn't give a damn even about his face, but you have to think that like the international trailer probably never even showed him in his helmet.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. We should look and see if we can find one of those too. His boss says there were 7 summary executions. Were they necessary? Dredd says they were unavoidable. He tells Dredd starting tomorrow he's going to spend 2 days a week at the academy. Initially, Dredd is like, that's an honor. I can't wait to do it. But then he realizes he's going to be head of ethics class. So why do you think they're putting Dredd as head of ethics in the academy?
I mean, I could make some guesses because this is what I say, like the storyline doesn't like necessarily fully add up because it's like, okay, are they doing that to get him off the street because he's too violent and he had 7 summary executions? Or are they doing that because the incoming judges don't know ethics and Judge Dredd does everything by the book? So is he being punished or rewarded? I honestly don't know. Mm-hmm.
We're going to meet our bad guy next. Rico's in this jail area, kind of surrounded by this blue shield. Again, the special effects in this movie are top notch for 1995. Rico's handed some type of metal box. He says something about the meaning of life, and the guy says, "So Rico, what is the meaning of life?" And the metal contraption forms into a gun. He shoots him in the throat and says, "It ends." I like the line. I'm interested in this Rico character at this point. I know we've already talked about him a little bit in the casting, but what are your initial thoughts on him?
He's an anomaly. Like, okay, so coming in knowing nothing, we see it was a judge that goes to visit him, right? Or is it just it's the warden? Okay,
yeah, it's just a warden.
So we see him. He's in this ridiculously high-tech prison. The warden is very cautiously approaching him, and he's got those guns facing him out. Like it reminded me of the scene in X-Men when Magneto's in that super high security prison. It's that same sort of feeling. And then even like it sort of reminded me a little bit of Demolition Man. It was very, 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 very like, oh, there's no way this horrible person could ever get out.
Mm-hmm.
And then he does. You realize like he's a lot worse than you could possibly have imagined.
Yeah. One of the next part of the scene is you have these guards that come rushing in. How much do these guys look like stormtroopers from Star Wars?
Oh my gosh, they do.
I mean, that could not have been any more of a ripoff. Maybe they stole it from Spaceballs, though. Keep firing, assholes!
I like that was good. Well done.
At the Academy, Judge Dredd is teaching a new class about weapons and transportation. The motorbike has a malfunction. He makes a small joke and says the only thing that matters when you're by yourself out there is this. He puts out a small Bible-looking thing and slams it down and says, "This is the law." So I'm assuming there's just a big law book that he carries around with him, pocket size. You will be alone when you are asked to uphold these laws. So he kind of puts the fear of God into the cadets and just says, hey, you're going to be put in situations where you've got to make decisions and you have to do everything by the book, basically. Now, in the locker room, Hershey walks up to Judge Dredd. I find it a little strange that it's a multi-gender locker room and she can just walk around in there with naked guys, but good for her, I guess. Before she even gets to him, he turns without even seeing her and goes, "I can hear you thinking." She tells him he's maybe being too hard on the cadets. She asked him if he's always been alone out there. Have you ever had a friend? He says once and tries to walk away without giving more, but she presses on what happened and he turns and says, "I judged him." So we don't know a lot about what happened at this point, but it does smash right to Rico in the next scene. So he sits up out of a body bag and shoots another guard. I mean, at this point, obviously you know the outcome, but do you just assume he's the one that he judged since they smash right to him in the next scene?
That's a good question, and I wish I didn't know the answer now.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's obvious necessarily that they are. I mean, they kind of look similar, but again, without knowing a backstory, I think it's pretty vague that there would be a connection between the two of them yet.
Yeah. Okay. Next,
can we? Can I pause you for a moment? Can we jump back to the last scene that we were just in?
Yes.
My question is, what the hell kind of ethics class is he teaching?
I don't know.
He's teaching ethics by shooting the gun and showing them the motorcycle. Like, what? That's not ethics.
Yeah.
What ethics?
I know I said he makes a small joke. I think he just says something about, like, bike never works. Like, and they chuckle a little bit. But, yeah, to your point, this is not very... I guess the only part that would be ethics is he talks about the book at the end. But, you start ethics class with teaching them how to fire a lawgiver?
Right. It doesn't add up. And then the other thing is he's shooting at the judge's armor.
Yes.
He's explaining his bulletproof this and his disclaimer talking that.
But every time the judges are in the field and they get mowed down by bullets.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I never picked up on that as a kid, that their armor's supposed to be bulletproof. And
Right.
he's shooting at it in ethics class. He's shooting, and he's like, it's bulletproof. And then later on, it's like, oh, one bullet and the judge is dead.
Right. That's a really good catch. I did not put those two things together, but now that you say it, like, that's exactly what happens. So Rico's on the streets next. He enters a gun and ammo store. He approaches a man behind the desk who says, we're closed for the night. Rico says, you're holding a package for me. And he gives him the name that it's under. The store owner hands him the package, and it's a locked case. He opens it up, and you see a gun. It's the lawgiver. The man yells, don't touch it. It's programmed to only recognize a judge. If you touch it, it'll take your arm off. Rico picks it up and just says, how do you like that? I must be a judge. And he shoots him in the head. So at this point, I'm guessing he's his former partner. At that point, that's got to be the telling sign, right?
Oh, well, you did see this. I would love somebody's input for, if you have not seen Judge Dredd yet, if you've not watched it, I wish you hadn't listened and we hadn't spoiled it for you, but I would love to know somebody that, when did you piece this together that Rico and Judge Dredd were united?
Yeah, tweet at us or shoot us a message on Instagram. Let us know when you put it all together. We'd love to hear it. Next, Rico starts up a giant robot. He tells the robot that he's the commander, and the robot will ask what the mission is, and he laughs a bit and says, we're going to war. So next, we've got a news reporter on the TV. He's talking to his wife in the home. He says the whole system is the issue. When the front door bursts open and he gets shot a bunch of times, and on the badge, all you see is it just says Dredd. And we don't get a good look at him, though. But, I mean, at this point, you got to assume that Dredd just killed this TV reporter for no reason.
Well, you can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking your head up a butcher's ass.
I'd rather take his word for it, though. Now, Hershey is on duty. She sees a car kind of knocking in between another car several times. She walks over. The door opens up. She, again, will ask for the card, which I guess is how we identify ourselves in 2080. He gives her some pushback, but Dredd shows up and grabs the card and says it's his fourth offense. And he asks the guy how he pleads, not guilty. I knew you'd say that. He points his lawgiver and says grenade and blows up the guy's vehicle. So next, he's approached by a group of judges, and they tell him he's under arrest for murder. All he does is snarl, and then we see him in a holding cell next. So what did you... Now, are these guys... do you call those judges, too, the guys that are all in black? I don't think that they're ever really given a name.
I don't know. Judge Dredd fans, Eagle Comic fans, shout out to us. Whoa, who are those dudes?
Yeah, we're gonna call them judges for now, assuming that they are.
But I love the scene with the car though, because I think, and I'm so happy that you read that quote from Stallone, because it's so insane to think that as a judge, as a keeper of peace and of the law, that his answer to a moving violation is, I'm going to blow up your car.
Right.
Like, I think that's like a lot of the social commentary that Judge Dredd should be tackling, that it sort of alludes to, but doesn't necessarily fully embrace. And like that scene is just like, Judge Dredd is this perfect version of a judge, of a cop, and yet just like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Really?
Exactly. So Dredd's captain enters the holding cell next. He asks him if it's true. Dredd says it's not true. And he asks if he believes it. And all the captain says, I just need to look into your eyes to be sure for myself. He asked if he's picked someone to defend him. Dredd says he's picked Judge Hershey. She can be trusted. So in the next scene here, he's in the courtroom, so to speak. They're watching playback from the shooting. It's really fuzzy. It's hard to make out exactly what it is that's going on in the video. Hershey says the video is inadmissible as evidence, and she explains that they have an expert in digital and video, and it says the quality and definition is too low to prove anything against Dredd. And Judge Fargo sustains the objection for the video, and that's a small victory for Dredd and Hershey. Hershey gets a little smile out of Dredd and says, "You owe me one." So that's going to be the first of several ones that he owes her. Next, Judge Magruder, who's basically the prosecutor, says she's going to access top secret documentation with help from Central Computer Bank. They have the ability to match his DNA with the actual lawgiver that's used, so each bullet contains a small part of DNA of the user. So they recovered the bullets from the body, and it's a 100% match with Dredd. He screams, "It's been falsified! I am the law!" And
Angela!
He asked Hershey to believe him. She does, but I think she's a little hesitant. The prosecutor rests. The tribunal adjourns to discuss. Judge Fargo can't believe that he's made a mistake on Dredd. So the tribunal does find him guilty as charged. Judge Fargo says, "You know that the only punishment for murder is death." However, Fargo steps down from his position, and as his last request, he asks that they be lenient on Dredd. Judge Griffin, who's going to take place of Fargo, says he sentences him to life in prison. Hershey apologizes for not doing better. Dredd says she did her best. And he's off to jail. So, bum deal for him, huh?
Well, I mean, it's great because what happens to him directly parallels what happens to Rob Schneider.
Yes.
Both are misjudged. Both are, overly convicted of crimes that they didn't really. I mean, Rob Schneider did tamper with the public robot.
Right.
But it wasn't tampering. It was just he was saving his own hide.
Right.
So it's a great parallel between the two characters, which I think it actually does pay off later in the story.
Definitely.
The other great thing that I noticed as an adult for the first time in the scene is when Stallone's in that prison cell and the guy's like, "I just wanted to look into your eyes."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, boom, blew my mind. Like, holy shit, Stallone has bright blue eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Try watching the movie now after you see Stallone with his obvious contacts or CGI blue eyes. It's just so distracting.
Yeah, that's a weird thing that they would do to him. As Italian as he gets, he's not going to have blue eyes. He's always a dark-eyed guy, but I don't know. Very strange. Next scene, Judge Griffin enters his office to find Rico. Griffin says, "We were supposed to meet somewhere safe." Rico yells, "Forget Dredd. There is no Dredd. Let me tell you what he worships. He worships the law. Let him see what it's like to freeze his ass off in Aspen like me." Griffin tells Rico he wants chaos on the streets. In between, Hershey discovers a photo of Dredd and Rico, so that's notable. There's no talking or anything, but it's just a little flash-in scene that they have. Next, we have Fergie, and he's sitting right next to Dredd on a plane. He looks over and kind of puts his hand up to cover his eyes and stuff, so it looks like his mask. And then he says Dredd, and Dredd snatches his hand away from him. Another passenger kind of sees the same thing as it's happening, so he's been found out. Fergie says, "What are the odds? Two guys falsely accused of something sitting right next to each other." And Dredd explains he received the proper sentence for his error. The law doesn't make mistakes, which Fergie says, "So if that's the case, what are you doing here?"
Zing!
And then Dredd kind of ponders that, and then one of the passengers pulls a shank from his pocket and attacks Dredd from behind. He's able to fend him off, but at the same time, we've got that outside shot of these three weird characters that are standing outside, and they shoot down the plane as it starts to crash into the ground. What did you think of the initial scene just with Fergie and Dredd here? And then obviously we'll talk about them getting shot down in a second.
Yeah, so it's definitely starting to pay off, the juxtaposition between Fergie and what he did wrong and Dredd and what he did wrong.
Yeah.
And it really heightens the tension when we got the Angel Gang. Now they're outside in the cursed earth, shooting fucking rocket launchers at airplanes. Like, so there's tension inside the plane as Judge Dredd's getting attacked to be shanked. He's being sent away to prison for a crime he didn't commit. And all these freaking blood-sucking cannibals are shooting rocket launchers at him.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a bad day.
No kidding. So in this next part, Hershey is scanning the photo that she found. Central Computer explains that the photo from the terminal has been removed and she cannot view it. Back at the crash site, there's no sign of Dredd as they search for his body. And then in the next scene, we see Fergie and Dredd hanging from the ceiling. The men who shot down the plane, the Angel family, enter. Dredd says they are the legendary Angel family. He calls them murderers, scavengers, and scumbags. And the dad is the leader of the group. Fergie manages to kind of talk his way into the good graces of the family, at least he thinks. And they end up taking him down, which Dredd warned him not to do. But while they're kind of doing some things with him, he manages to get his hands free.
So easily, too. He just slips it out like it's greased with Crisco.
I know. Well, that's from all his Rambo movies. He's well versed in these ropes.
Oh, touche.
Yeah. I love the line where Fergie says, "Don't eat me. I have eczema, warts, gonorrhea. Eat Dredd. He works out."
You do a good Rob Schneider.
Yeah, not bad. Paul tells the Mean Machine to finish Dredd, and he says, "My pleasure, Paul." But as he tries to go at him, Dredd frees himself and starts killing the Angel family one by one. Some judges come in searching for Dredd. They fire their guns at him. He escapes. He kills everyone except for Fergie and drops his gun. Fergie says, "We got them all, pussies." Dredd accuses him of crying, which Fergie denies. And then he yells, "Watch out." You turn around and a guy's about ready to shoot Dredd, but Judge Fargo comes to the rescue and shoots the judge from behind. But then, in the next instance, he's killed by Mean Machine, who's not dead, and he knifes him right through the heart. So that's the end of Judge Fargo. Well, he'll be gone in a few minutes, I should say. Judge Fargo is killed by Mean Machine with a knife right through the heart. Dredd and Machine start the fight. Machine gets his hand caught in a wooden post, and Dredd electrocutes him, reading him his rights and asking him how he pleads. Of course, he says, "I knew you'd say that," before he electrocutes him. Hershey's with one of the cadets trying to do facial recognition. She's mad because he's used the wrong photo and wasted 3 hours. The cadet says, "If this is the wrong picture, why is it fake?" And the only real thing in the photo is the baby. The parents in the background of the photo are all fake. So that's kind of an interesting twist.
It was, and I definitely I never really noticed this computer nerd cadet, but they really rely on him because he testifies in the courtroom scene, and now Hershey's got him, examining photos. Like, this guy plays a pretty big part for a cadet.
Yep. Now, Dredd talks with the dying Judge Fargo. Fargo tells him the picture of him and the parents are fake, so we get that answered right away. He finds out he has a brother. Judge Fargo says he was your best friend at the academy, but then you judged him. So Rico is his brother. Dredd is pissed. He knows that it wasn't him that killed the reporter, it was Rico, and that he used the DNA because their DNA would be matching. Dredd asks Fargo not to die, but then he turns his head and dies seconds later. Not to laugh at Fargo, but I mean, it was like, "Hey, don't die," and then he just turns his head and dies. So I mean, kind of a nice plot twist here. What do you think about finding out that Rico is Dredd's brother?
Hold on. So it's definitely the major plot twist that the movie's relying on. Again, it's sort of like, I feel that the story confuses itself because we're not talking about social justice issues. We're talking about the plot twist that Rico is Dredd's brother. Mm-hmm. And so, especially after seeing just how awful Rico is, I think it does lead to there being some credence to finding out I don't want to lay down any spoilers yet, but to find out who they are and why they are. And, that plays the story of good versus evil really well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then in the next scene here, Fergie asked, what should we do? And Dredd cocks his gun and says, find Rico. So back at the office with the council, Rico again promises that they will have war. So in the next scene, we start seeing several explosions. The war has begun. The robot kills several judges in an alley. Rico smokes a stogie and says, my boy. Dredd and Fergie are in the desert trying to figure out how to get in. Fergie says there's no way in. It's not like we can go knock on the door. Hello, cursed earth. Pizza.
I love that line.
Yeah.
Pizza.
Dredd explains that a few years ago some refugees had a theory of how to get in. And Fergie asks, well, did they survive? Dredd says, no, they were toasted. But that's going to be his plan, is to try and steal the refugees. In the next scene, we see Hershey almost get blown up on her cruiser. Council next says that a new report has said 96 judges have been assassinated. Judge Griffin says there is one solution, Project Janus. One council member says we don't need a bunch of test tube babies. Griffin does a good job of convincing the council members as we get into the next scene here, and Dredd and Fergie are at this tunnel, which keeps spitting out a bunch of fire. Dredd says, ready, kid? Fergie says he's going to get him killed. Great time I'm having. Shuttle crash, cursed earth, and now a fireball up my ass. Fergie says he's not going anywhere until he's caught or you apologize. Dredd says he's never apologized, and then yells, run for it. And they start running down this tunnel. Fergie, of course, falls down because he's the clumsy one.
Of course he falls down, and he falls down and just lays there and screams for Dredd to help him.
I know.
Dredd, help me, Dredd!
So Dredd, who, for whatever reason, instead of just picking up right away, pauses and watches the fire get close. And then he picks him up and kind of shoots out part of the floor, and then they jump down and survive. When they do wake up from their fall, or I guess sit up from their fall, Fergie goes, I'm alive, and then looks at Dredd and goes, oh, you are too.
I think that's really funny because, all throughout the movie, Fergie is the comic relief.
Oh, definitely.
He's definitely the comic relief. And it comes up a few times throughout the movie, but you sort of forget that he himself is also a criminal.
Yeah.
Well, a good criminal, or however he justifies it to himself, where he's like, I'm not one of the dangerous ones. But he still was in prison, so he's still kind of an asshole. Yep. I don't think that's a comical line. I think he's just kind of like, shit, you're still alive too.
Yep. Now they've made it into the locker room next. Fergie distracts one of the judges when Dredd knocks him out. Dredd starts to remove all the clothes, which Fergie says, what are you doing? We don't have time for this.
I never picked up on that as a kid, but it's such a weird scene.
Yeah.
It's just, we don't have time for this. Like, What, are you really going to butt rape this knocked out judge in front of me?
I love that that's what he thought he was going to do, though. Judge Griffin asked the computer how long it would take to engineer a fully adult subject. The computer says it can produce a subject in 8 hours. Griffin and the council argue. They want to shut this down, but Griffin orders the computer to keep Janus open. They tell Griffin he sealed his own fate, but he says no, they've sealed theirs, and he calls in Rico. Rico kills all the council members, and he says, one of the parts that he says at the end there is, who says politics are boring? So, good old Rico just killing everybody. Now, next, we've got Dredd busting in, and he locks eyes with Rico for the first time. So we got a little stare down here. Rico runs out. Dredd tells Griffin he's under arrest. Griffin shoots himself in the arm and calls for the guards and tells them Dredd just killed the entire council. So Dredd runs for it. I love Fergie tells Dredd, you're a lot of fun to be with. as they jump onto a motorbike and go off the side of a building, narrowly escaping before almost crashing their bike because of a malfunction. I think for 1995, I know I've mentioned this a few times, but the CGI is not terrible here.
No, it's not terrible. It looks really good. And on that note, this is probably one of the hardest levels in the video game.
Yeah.
Just so you know, prepare. There's a flying level in the Judge Dredd video game.
Nice. Does the bike malfunction quite a bit?
I think if you go too fast, it overheats.
Oh, nice. So Dredd and Fergie are getting chased by several judges on their tail here. Dredd tells Fergie to shoot him. He tries to shoot him, but says it won't work. Dredd tells him, "You have to cock it first, moron." And Fergie says, "You didn't say anything about cocking." I don't know. Is there just way too much cock talk here, or is it just me?
Well, I hadn't picked up on that even, having watched it a couple of days ago. But yeah, that is a lot of cock talk.
Yeah. Finally, Dredd jumps over to another motorbike that's gotten right next to them. He throws the guys off. Fergie's about to crash when Dredd pulls him to safety. Next, they're in Hershey's apartment. It's destroyed. Fergie says she's definitely not going to get her deposit back. It doesn't pay to be your friend, Dredd. And he walks to the back, and Hershey's in there. She pulls her gun on him and says 108 judges in the last 48 hours are dead. What the hell is going on? Dredd asks if she thinks he's part of this, and he assures her that he would never do anything to hurt her.
Well, why does she immediately think he's involved?
I don't know.
This is somebody that she's trusted, and has backed up, and they fought together, and he saved her life. And immediately, because as far as she knows, he's in prison.
Right. That's true. She doesn't know he's gone. That's definitely another plot hole, script issue. She wants to know about the picture with Rico. He explains his name is Rico and he's his brother. So in the next scene, we've got Rico overriding the computer and telling it to take his DNA sample. Ilsa tries to stop him, but he puts his arm in the machine and it takes his blood sample. And then we have Hershey and Dredd having a heart-to-heart. Fergie interrupts and says he can't fix the terminal, but good news, I fixed the microwave, and he eats a bite of popcorn.
I love it. I love when a movie is going to take... Do you think they'll have microwaves in 2080?
No.
I mean, they've got bicycles that can... Bicycles. They've got motorbikes that can fly, but they're still relying on microwaves to pop popcorn?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's like Back to the Future 2. It'll be like, Mom, you sure know how to hydrate a pizza. Next, we got Griffin tells Rico and Dredd that they got away from the hunters. Rico tells him that he's about to seriously be outnumbered. Rico tells Griffin that he replaced the sample DNAs with his own. Griffin is pissed. Rico tells him he should be happy for him. He's about to be a father. The robot grabs Griffin and rips his arms and legs off and kills him. So they've now turned on Griffin. Next, Dredd, Hershey, and Fergie walk into a building. He tells Fergie to hang back. Fergie tells him that he brings Dredd good luck. Hershey agrees. He's still alive. The robot grabs Hershey, holding her by the neck. Dredd tries to fire back at the robot, and that's when Rico enters and tells him to drop the weapon or he will break her neck. So Rico, in the next scene, tells Central to send in the clones, and we see a giant test tube dropping from the ceiling. What did you think of the test tube looking people? These guys are kind of freaky here.
Oh, they definitely gave me nightmares as a kid. They were creepy, they were scary. I have hated the idea of human cloning ever since Judge Dredd.
Yeah. Yep. Rico tells Dredd he's going to have some new brothers in about 2 hours. They're an endless supply of perfection. Rico wants to know why Dredd judged him. Dredd yells that you broke the law. Rico says, I was your brother, your friend. He tells him he's the only family he's ever had, and he tells Dredd to choose. Dredd tells him the best thing you can do right now is kill me because it's your only chance. The robot drops Hershey and hits Rico. Fergie's in the back of the robot rewiring it, so Fergie to the rescue. Rewires the robot, gets him to stop trying to kill everybody. And then Rico orders Central to hatch the clones. The system tells him they're only 60%, but he needs reinforcements now, so he orders the unleashing of the clones here. Hershey and Ilsa get into a fight. She calls Hershey a bitch, and then Hershey headbutts her and says, "That's Judge, bitch."
One-liners.
Yeah, I love it. Explosion happens in the test tube area. It blows everything up. Rico tries to escape, but Dredd pulls him off of the motorbike. They fight at the top of the crown of the Statue of Liberty. Rico gets the best of him initially, ending with Dredd out of the building, holding on for his life. Rico's about to shoot him, but the gun won't fire. Dredd grabs it and throws him over the edge and says, "Court's adjourned." Ilsa then pulls a gun on Dredd, but before she can kill him, Hershey shoots her from behind and pulls him up and says, "Now that's 3 you owe me." So there was a 2 in there, but I think I left it out.
That's what she said.
They exit the council building. It's now daylight. All the judges are waiting for him. He asks if he's under arrest. The cadet who helped with the facial recognition says the Central broadcast the Janus plan, and they all know the truth. Dredd is offered the position of street justice, but he declines and says he's a street judge. We see Fergie on a gurney go by. He says, "Of course, he gets all the credit. I taught him everything." Hershey goes to Dredd and asks if he's not going to say goodbye. He says goodbye, and then she leans in and kisses him. And then we go back to Fergie, who says, "I'm probably a much better kisser." And then that's our last scene with Fergie. He's going to exit the movie. Hershey puts on Dredd's helmet for him. She says, "It's good to be human, isn't it?" "I knew you'd say that." And Dredd drives off. Everyone starts cheering him. He got like a little smile on his face as he literally rides off into the sunset, and that's how the movie ends.
Literally, you're not even kidding. It's literally into the sunset.
Yep. So final thoughts on the movie here for you.
It keeps all the corny and the camp of a 90s movie that it can. The ending is, of course there's a kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know. I can't say anything more about how much I enjoy it, but how much I know that it's not as great of a movie as it could be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Stallone hit the nail on the head. This is a big missed opportunity. This film could have been much better. Ultimately, I think I'll remember this movie for just being a very entertaining movie, action-wise, and the relationship between Fergie and Judge Dredd is the highlight for me, for sure. I think Rob Schneider is just hilarious in this movie. And I think if I would have caught that the first time around, I probably would have been a bigger fan. We want to thank you again for hitting the download button and listening to this week's episode of the Back in Time podcast. We had a great time revisiting Judge Dredd. It definitely had its moments, but ultimately it's a bit of a miss overall. Next week, we will be jumping into October and going back to 1991 to review the fantasy comedy film, The Addams Family. Please take a moment to subscribe to us on Apple Podcast or the podcast app on your device. It's super easy to do. It doesn't cost you a penny, and it'll make sure that you never miss an episode. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/backintimepod. We're on social media, Twitter and Instagram at backintimepod. Use the hashtag backintimepod to leave us a question, a comment, or a short review of this week's episode. You can also visit us online at backintimepod.wordpress.com, and all episodes are available on YouTube. But for now, we are out of time. It's time to jump back into DeLorean, punch in September 29, 2017, and return back to present day. Have a great week, and thanks for listening.
It means your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. Both of you. We will, Doc. Stand back.